Well, get it, just. Welcome to this edition of Weeds World. I am joined by St. Anne Police Chief Marc Robichaud. How are you doing today?
Good. Yeah, I'm doing well.
Good. I'm glad you're able to make it.
It's my pleasure. It's nice distraction, something different.
I guess with being police chief, there's a lot of things going on, so this is a nice little getaway from that, eh?
Yeah, it's a nice something different.
Yeah,
for sure.
So tell us a little bit about what you do and.
I'm the police chief in St. Anne. I've been here for the last 16 years now.
16. Eh?
So it's been a long time. And in that time, I've really seen the town grow and the community grow, and it's been a fantastic place to work. I came here 16 years ago, and I said it was going to be a 2-year gig for me, and that I wasn't really interested in being a small town police chief. I was just going to come and get things stabilized here and get the town in a good position with the police department. And then after 3 years, I said, I'll maybe be here for 5. And after 5, I said, probably 8. And now I'm just committed to probably retiring here, I think. Yeah.
Hey, that's a good plan to have.
Yeah.
So over the last 16 years, there's been a lot of change.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
I think just in the town we've had the last 8 years, we've doubled, right? 16.
Yeah, it's absolutely. From my perspective, obviously seeing the town change is unique, but also seeing how the police department's changed and the interaction with the public has changed over the years, and all of those different things are certainly interesting, and it's been quite dynamic, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, talk about that a little bit. You said interaction with the public. I know it because I live here, so I understand that, but maybe other people don't know. They talk about St. Anne and purpose of the interaction with the police in this community.
I think that as a policing model, when I came here, I had a vision of what I wanted to see as a police chief and what I wanted to see as a police department, and that was very much a community involved police department where we interact with the public on a regular basis, where people feel comfortable dealing with us, and where we approach everybody the same way, whether it's a victim of a crime that we're dealing with, or whether it's an offender, that we treat everybody with a high level of respect and interact with them on a very understanding level. And that's always been my mantra with dealing with the public is that we deal with everybody the same, and it doesn't matter if we're going to a domestic and we're dealing with the victim and we're dealing with the offender. We're dealing with 2 people that are both in crisis.
Yeah. That's
held true, I think, throughout the 16 years that I've been here. It was maybe a little bit easier in the beginning because you knew a lot more of the people that you were dealing with, and now with the growth, often we deal with people that we don't know and don't know us, and we're trying to build a rapport on the spot with them. So that can be a little bit more challenging. And also with that, I subscribe to a position of kind of a zero tolerance, and that's with respect to things like impaired driving and reckless driving. And so part of our mantra too is to be out, be visible, be stopping a lot of vehicles, letting people know that we're out there, and making it well known that we're not a community that, if you're looking at doing bad things, this is probably not the place to come, because the police are probably going to stop you at night. They're probably going to check what you're doing. And I know over time that's a scenario where at first it took a bit of getting used to by local people, that the police were hyper present. And over the years, it's become something that people have learned to, I think, appreciate, right? That seeing the police, we don't get a lot of pushback when, people get stopped at night, and, we tell them we're just checking to make sure, and they're like, no, we're good with that, thank you very much. But again, I think it presents some new challenges with the town growing, because there's also people moving here that aren't used to that type of interaction.
Sure.
And aren't used to the police being, I don't want to say up in your business all the time, because that's not what I mean, but the
being
police
present.
Being present. Like tonight, after dark, the police will be out and they'll be on the roads and they'll be stopping vehicles and they'll be looking for impaired drivers, and chances are it's a Thursday night, they'll probably get one.
Yeah. That's ideally what we want, is we don't want impaired drivers.
But on the flip side, in order to catch those impaired drivers, you have to pull cars over.
Yeah, you're not batting 1,000 on that.
You got to pull cars over. It's not a magic trick. You've got to be able to find out who they are. You got to pull people over and check how people are doing, and are they drinking? And that can be a quick interaction sometimes. Hey, how you doing? I can tell this guy hasn't been drinking. Well, you're just pulled you over because your license plate's out, or you've got a broken taillight or whatever, and make sure you get that fixed and have a good night. Or that could turn to hey, I need you to blow into this and
Right.
show to me that you're not impaired.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of impaireds in this town, right?
Which is surprising.
So I got to be careful. Like when I say we get a lot of
Sure.
impaireds in this town, we arrest a lot of impaireds. I think comparatively to other communities, we arrest a lot of impaireds. I don't think we have more impaireds here than other communities. I think just our enforcement strategy and our presence lends us to being able to take those people off the road.
That's just it, is the presence, right? It's because other communities don't have police force,
Sure.
which is going to play well.
Like some of them do, right? Like
Some do, sure.
You know, but for the most part, no.
But generally, it's not the same as this, right? Like where we have police force that's actively in town, present, doing
Sure.
there. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas other communities, they're covering RCMP, for instance. They have a big area to cover, and they don't have a
huge area.
chance to do the same thing.
Yeah,
That's
huge
happening.
area to cover for sure.
So
yeah, it changes the dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Where we're policing, I would say probably close to 4,000 people now here. I would think we're somewhere, you would probably know better than me, but I would think we're somewhere in that range, that it's in a small area and we're able to police that effectively.
absolutely, yeah. And I know community interaction is big because just even when my kids were small, having officers come by and they had a lemonade stand and they'd buy a lemonade.
sure,
and
yeah.
you'd give them a little bit
Yeah,
extra
yeah,
money, and
yeah.
like they'd talk about that, and that my son used that to buy his first bike, like towards to buy his first bike. I know other people who they're playing basketball and they just got joined for 5-10 minutes, but that's an impactful thing where
Yeah.
it just so building that image even of it was
Yeah,
huge.
and it's good for, we have a unique opportunity here too, because we have the auxiliary program, and then we have the community safety officer program, and then we have the regular policeman. And most of the people that work for us now have come up through that process.
Okay.
So it's really been an opportunity to assess these people over a longer period of time, to look at suitability and whether they fit into the model here that we espouse to. And then we're able to assess them in progressively more responsible roles. Most of the guys here, like I said, that's how they've come up.
Okay.
So it means that we get to know who we're hiring. We're not hiring a constable based on a piece of paper and recommendations or
Right.
some bullshit reference from somebody. Like, we're able to do it based on
Yeah.
our dealings with these people and knowing what they're like from having worked with them.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple different programs. Could you just maybe talk about the difference between like auxiliary and CSO, community safety?
Yeah.
officer? Just
So the auxiliary program is a volunteer program that we have in St. Anne, where we train people and they come out and help the police. They work with the police. Most of our candidates come from the city, and over the years we've had an auxiliary program for the last, I would say 14 years, 15
Okay.
years, and we've had hundreds of young people come through that program. Literally, we have well over 100 people that have come through that program and are now in law enforcement jobs other places.
okay.
So it's been a real opportunity for us to help people get into policing. On the flip side, there's been people that have come from the program and decided that policing wasn't the career for them. And those are people that maybe had applications in other places that would have gone on to careers in policing, and maybe that wasn't the right career for them. And then we have the community safety officer program, which is a program through the province where they assist us, but they do a little bit of their own thing. So they're able to go out and do traffic enforcement, and they do bylaw enforcement. That's a paid position that we have. And we really use that as a training ground for people to move into policing, and from there sending them to the police academy and stuff like that. But that's our major programs. But yeah, we've had literally hundreds of people come through not only our auxiliary program, but our regular policing program that have gone on to other places. And over the years, it's been, I don't want to say a training ground for other organizations, but that wouldn't be unfair to say that a lot
Right.
of our people come here and work for a few years and then move on to something bigger or change.
But that also helps with different aspects of it, right? With budgetary for everything too. Because like if you're always have to pay top dollar for everybody, like where you have the ability and patience to train and
Yeah.
like there's an aspect of that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it's your younger, more junior members are the ones that are going to go out and really work hard.
Yeah.
They don't know a lot, but they're going to go out and do a lot of work. And then you have people that have been around for a while and their knowledge level is very high. Their motivation might not be the same as somebody starting out, but their knowledge level is high. And you need that mix because we get such a diverse file load here that we have files that are really high-end files, and we have files that are smaller, and we need the expertise to be able to deal with some of these higher-end files, like some sexual assaults and things like that are more complicated, and files that take a lot more work and demand a lot more from the courts to be able to deal with those.
Yeah. And not only that, but you talked about sending people out, but there's also been a little bit of a trend of people coming back, haven't there?
Yeah, we've got 100%. Like we have right now, we have three of our staff have left and come back.
Yeah.
Scott Baduke, who's the operational sergeant now, was gone for 7 years. He started as an auxiliary here, worked as a casual constable here. Constable Hertet was here and started off as an auxiliary, became a regular member, then went to First Nations policing like Scott, and he came back after 3 years. Charlie was our CSO and went to First Nations policing and decided very quickly that wasn't for him, and came back into a position here. Yeah, it's a bit of a trend. And then we always hear from people that we always get people dipping their toe back in. Hey, if I ever wanted to come back, would there be a spot open? And we get that quite a bit, right?
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Grass isn't always greener on the other side, right?
There's different aspects to it, right? Some may pay more, but the risk is higher. Some may have this, but then there's that, right? Like,
yeah, there's a lot of things that attract people to go other places. Some of it's career development.
Yeah.
Some of it could be wages, maybe, although St. Anne is pretty competitive.
Yeah.
It could also be, some guys don't, in St. Anne, a lot of times you got to work alone because we're a small town. We often don't have two members on a shift, although you might have the support of the community safety officer. But working alone can be challenging, especially if you do it for a protracted period of time and going to calls that are higher risk and you're going by yourself and you don't have that immediate backup on hand. That can be challenging. You know? And that can weigh on you, but you're always very conscious of, I got a call to a domestic. Do I go there right away because I'm by myself? Do I wait for backup to come? Is somebody in immediate danger? And there's that moral aspect of it too that you got to deal with. And I know the members here, ultimately they're going to go. It's a stressful situation.
Yeah.
Put yourself in the middle of a domestic by yourself.
So being a smaller community, is there enough, I kind of get asked this, is there enough problems or issues or reason for the police here? Because we're a small community. Like, are you guys busy?
Oh yeah.
Like, that's a question I've heard a number of times.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, that's a valid question. Yeah, we're busy. We did over 2,000 files this year.
Wow.
Probably 500 of those files would have been traffic related files, but calls for service are high. We're on certainly on a weekly basis, we're arresting people that require a remand hearing. There wouldn't be a day shift or a night shift that goes by that there wouldn't be a criminal code file generally that's picked up by the officers. So yeah, they're busy. I wouldn't say that they're busy like a Steinbach's busy, but they're busy.
Steinbach they're a lot bigger though too.
Absolutely,
right?
we have different resources and a different dynamic. And again, when you talk about being busy, there's a lot to do with expectation as well. Files that people might not expect the police to show up to at other places, there's an expectation that the police are going to show up to here. And if somebody calls and they want to come talk to the police, it's never going to be a situation where we say, come tomorrow or come the next day. It's going to be, we'll make arrangements to see you now. We'll do what we have to do to see you now. And I think there's an expectation of that here. And I hope, for the most part, we live up to it.
Yeah, even for myself, I've had issues in the past that I've had to call and just to get assistance with it, and you guys were like there like that, right? And
yeah,
so that was great.
Yeah,
have that
I think that's an expectation. Right. The expectation is if you call the police, they're coming.
Yeah,
and they're coming quickly. If it's an emergency, they're coming quickly. So yeah, for sure. It's getting busier with the amount of people that we've had that have come into town, that have moved here, and in some cases, people move here and bring their problems with them. And I don't mean that with the majority of people coming here, but
right.
it doesn't take a whole bunch of people bringing problems to cause us to be busier.
Yeah. And then you just have people, right? So your neighbors don't always get along, this or that, right? Yeah. There's tit for tat, these little things that happen.
Yeah.
And it's human. We're going to have disagreements. We're going to have issues.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
So, no, that makes a lot of sense. That talks a fair bit about the police, but let's talk about you a little bit more.
Sure.
Let's go. You said when you moved here 16 years ago, where'd you come from?
Well, I was on the east. I had originally started here with the Mounties in the 90s and didn't think policing was for me. I left policing. I started my own business with the retired chief of police from Winnipeg City, doing training. And at that time, it developed into what's now a training school in the city over the years. But yeah, we developed a training academy in the city, and then I decided I wanted to get back into policing, and I did that in Morden for a couple of years. And then I'm from the East Coast. I wanted to make a move back, so I moved to the East Coast and worked as a detective in policing for a number of years before I took a job with the lottery. And when I was with the lottery, I was managing their integrity and compliance division and 5 different groups within that organization. And my wife wanted to make a move back to Manitoba. Job in St. Anne came up, and I thought I can do that for a couple of years. That might be a good transition, and then I'll move back into a corporate type gig with either the lottery here or some similar type organization doing something with integrity, compliance based work. But that just didn't work out that way. I have a passion for policing. Even when I was working for the lottery, after a year working there, I was bored, and I took a part-time job on the weekends in Nova Scotia as a policeman. So I would end my Friday day shift in my suit and tie and my nice fancy corporate office, and I'd jump in my car and drive to Nova Scotia to patrol a city out there on the weekends. So I guess I have policing in my blood. I know I've left a couple of times to do other things, but so pull me back in. Yeah.
I guess you said you came out here to start training, right? Like with the other chief of police from the city or something?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Herb Stevens and I, when I left the Mounties, I really didn't think policing was the career for me. And we started a training company in the city, training security people and on all kinds of different levels. And that, again, doing that for a period of time made me really decide that I did want to get back into policing. And I think an important thing with it is that when I was originally in the mounted police, I had this idea of what a policeman was supposed to be like. I was on the SWAT team with the RCMP, and I really had this mold that I was trying to fit into. And like, I'm a drama geek from high school, right? When I was going to university, I was looking at fine arts degree, not policing. And then policing is something that I always had an interest in, but when I got into it, I really tried to be this macho policeman and really tried to fit this tough guy mold. I was always at conflict with it. And when I decided to get back into policing, I got back into policing as that drama geek. And that worked really well for me. Mm-hmm. And it served me well throughout my policing career, just being more true to myself and understanding that everybody doesn't have to be the same.
Right.
You can be whatever type of personality you are and bring that to policing. Now that's not to say that I don't still appreciate some of that stuff. I've been a use of force instructor pretty much my whole policing career, and been involved in teaching use of force and stuff like that. I still do a lot of teaching, but I also do it from a place of being that drama geek that played Dungeons and Dragons. No, I didn't get dressed up, but you know what I mean? Like you look at it and you go, okay, like policemen are all people and they're all different people, and you can't change your personality to become a policeman.
Right.
And I think that's maybe something that young policemen have a hard time with, is they have this image of what the police are supposed to be like. And that's tough, authoritative kind of person. And then the reality is that there's room for all kinds of different personalities in policing.
We bounced a little bit all over.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, let's go back earlier on. Let's talk about kind of career-wise, where you started, and let's progressively go through your career to how you got here, right? Because you touched on a bunch of areas, so
yeah.
It sounds
I joined the RCMP in 1990, and I was stationed in Stonewall, and I worked as a policeman in Stonewall and with the RCMP SWAT team out of Winnipeg, and I did that for 5 years, and then left the Mounties. When I left the Mounties, I started my own business with Herb Stevens, who was the retired chief of police in Winnipeg at the time. And we thought that there was a gap within the security industry in relation to training. So we did a lot of work petitioning the province to make changes to the Security Act and then providing training to, for the most part, First Nations communities in security and developing their own security. And we developed a lot of courses in relation to crisis management and frontline security and emergency kind of management stuff. And then I decided maybe policing is the right job for me if I go at it from the right angle. And after doing that for 3 years, I moved to Morden and took a job with the Morden Police Service. And that worked out really well. I enjoyed working in a small town, but I was looking for a little bit more and a little bit more opportunity. So I moved to the East Coast to the Ross Regional Police in New Brunswick, which is where I'm from, New Brunswick. And I worked about 6 months in uniform for them, and the next 5 years in plain clothes. I worked as an undercover operator with them. I worked in the organized crime unit, which was a joint unit throughout the province. I worked with their major crime unit, and then I transitioned over into VI class, which was with the RCMP.
Right.
And at that time, I'd done a number of secondments back to the RCMP, so I'd worked quite a bit with the RCMP in drug work and organized crime. But I went into the behavioral science unit with the RCMP in a unit that was called VI class, which was profiling violent offenders. It was looking at crimes and trying to link those crimes to other crimes based on behavior throughout the province. And I looked after all of the municipal police departments in relation to VI class.
Okay.
And VI class reporting. And then I was an analyst, so I would analyze reports that policemen would put in relation to violent crimes and sexual crimes and try to link those to other crimes to see if we can't find an offender. Quite often what it would be there'd be a sexual assault in a city, and I would look at the behavior of that and the verbology and the victimology of the file and things that were said and done within it, and say on the computer, I would say, show me all the files that look similar to this from a specific aspect. And then I would review those files and say, oh, geez, this file that happened 3 years ago in the northern part of the province really resembles this file, and we know who did this crime. We maybe need to go talk to this guy. And then I also specialized in forensic statement analysis. So that was reviewing statements, looking for deception and looking for whether people were telling the truth or being deceptive within their written statements. So I would give advice back to police departments on statements saying whether or not I thought they were truthful based on the language that the people used. Yeah. And that's what I was doing when I left policing to go to the lottery. My family was young at the time, and I was really looking I was actually in a position where I was going to leave that and go back on a regular patrol, and I thought, I don't want to do that. I'm too big. I'm too much of a hot shot to do that. My ego got in the way a little bit, so I ended up taking a corporate job, and that was manager of integrity and compliance with Atlantic Lottery, and that was overseeing 5 different groups within that organization, and from around the investigative process, but also around complying with provincial regulatory rules and a lot of that kind of stuff. And then, like I said, my wife wanted to make a move back, and the rest is history, as they say, right? My whole St. Anne experience started, which has been the best of my career.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. By far, being the chief of St. Anne has been the highlight of my professional career.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been good. I've had an opportunity to be involved with a lot of things in policing, and I was the president of the Manitoba Chiefs of Police Association for a number of years. So those kind of things have been good, especially being a small town chief. That's allowed me to reach out and do some things that kind of help elevate our department and help elevate our profile a little bit. And then I'm still really active in training, so I do a lot of training for First Nations communities.
Okay.
With the First Nations Safety Officer Program and the Community Safety Officer Program in the city. So I do a lot of training for the province.
Do they come here for that, or do you go to them?
I'll often go to them for that when I do that kind of stuff. I'm going to Thompson in the next couple of days to do a couple of days of training up there for the First Nation Safety Officer Program, and that will be First Nation safety officers from all over the north that will come down to Thompson for that. And I'll be involved in helping teach the use of force aspect of it.
Yeah. But that's something I think the province has really jumped on, is that CSO program. Right?
Yeah, the CSO program and the First Nation Safety Officer Program are both really good programs. Like, I'm a big fan of layered or tiered policing, which means that there's one group that has this responsibility, and then we can give other responsibilities in policing to other groups.
Right.
Everything doesn't have to be a policeman with a gun.
Yeah, not every call needs it, and that.
Not every.
And sometimes I'm sure that could escalate just
Yeah.
that thought of it.
Jeremy, that's the problem, is right. Not every call that you get needs a policeman with a gun, but sometimes calls that you get that don't need policemen with a gun turn into situations that you need policemen with a gun.
That's the danger.
And that's the danger for community safety officers. It's the danger for First Nation safety officers. It's the danger for all of those people, is that things escalate quickly. With our community safety officer here, we really emphasize disengaging. So you're not a policeman. You don't have to necessarily arrest people that you deal with. If
Right.
you've pulled a car over and somebody's getting aggressive, maybe that's a situation for you to just back off and call the police, as opposed to trying to interact with them and deal with them, right? Maybe outside your skill set.
The police are trained, just that extra training, different
Yeah.
training, right?
Different training, different equipment.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So what do you do? So that's career wise. So what do you do extracurricular? You said besides just training, because that.
Yeah. I've coached wrestling for years.
Okay.
I've coached wrestling really throughout most of my policing career. I've been a lifelong martial artist. I've been involved in martial arts my whole life.
Okay.
But I have a passion for wrestling, so I coach wrestling at the elementary school level here, and then into the high school level with kids. I coached a group of kids from probably grade 2 right up to grade 11 that competed for years in wrestling, and I've been involved. I've been a Manitoba Games coach twice.
Oh, really?
Here in Manitoba, and I've been the president of Wrestling Manitoba for a while, so I've been very active in it. Not as much now. I do a little bit of coaching right now. I'll probably ease myself back into it, but yeah, that's one of my big pastimes. I'm an avid swimmer, so I try to hit the pool a couple of times a week, and
Polar bear swim?
I gotta tell you this. So about 2 years after coming here, I developed what's called cold urticaria, which is an allergic reaction to the cold.
Oh.
And if I got exposed to the cold water, too much cold air, my face would swell up, my eyes would swell shut. I actually had an EpiPen because I could go into anaphylactic shock if I was in the cold too much.
Really?
And that just went away this year. So I had it for like literally 14 years, and it just went away. So they say that can happen.
Really?
But it was horrible because even in the late spring when it was like cold out, I'd have to wear a mask and stuff because of my face. And you learn just to bundle up. You don't go out and do a lot of stuff in the winter. But my fears were always things like, what if I put my car in the ditch? Or what if I get called to something as a policeman and I forget my cold weather gear? And my biggest fear has always been like, what if some kid in the spring falls in the river and you're like, man, if I jump in there, I'm gonna probably, I'm probably not gonna make it.
It's not going to go well.
It's not gonna go well for me. I might get that kid out, but it's probably not gonna go very well for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, most people don't, and it's funny because even I'll go to the hospital for something, and they'll go, "Are you allergic to anything?" And I'll say, "Yeah, the cold," and they'll go, "Ha, yeah, me too." Who is it? I'm like, "No, seriously."
No, it's severe. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really crappy because if you would pull a muscle, like I couldn't put an ice pack on it because it would just swell right up, and but it's gone. So life's good. Yeah.
Yeah. But you don't need to go test that theory or test it.
No, I'm not pushing it too hard. Like I swam outdoors this year till probably the beginning of October.
Really?
And my last swim would have been at 49 degrees.
That is cold.
Fahrenheit. Yeah,
that's pretty cold.
Yeah, that's once it gets below 50, I'm at my limit for a swim. But yeah.
Yeah, no, good for you.
Yeah, but if there was an opportunity to do a polar bear swim, I'm in now.
Okay, now
I'm in. Sign me up.
You're braver than me.
Yeah, sign me up.
I did the cold tub for a while there.
Yeah.
It was fine, but I just that was too much.
Yeah, I take a cold shower every morning. I really find that it helps get me going, and yeah. Even when I was allergic to the cold, I still took cold showers, but I would just take them short enough that it wouldn't cause me to start breaking out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess you figured out what your
limits are. You know what your limits are. You know your
your
timing and stuff. Yeah.
So what else do you do? Wrestling that was a pretty big thing, because I know some of the students you coached, or athletes you coached, like
Yeah.
they went pretty far into it, didn't they? Like,
Yeah, I had kids that won the provincials 4, 5, 6 years consecutively.
yeah.
Yeah, and actually, like I'm doing some coaching at Revelations Martial Arts in Steinbach right now. I'm coaching wrestling, and two of the young boys, Noah Godlewski and Austin Neufeld, both come out. It's funny because I knew them in that grade 2 level, and as they got older, and then when COVID came, it shut everything down, and that was the end of a lot of that. And now these boys are all in university coming out. They're all grown men that throw me around and beat me up, and I'm getting too old for all that stuff.
The students have become the master.
The student has become the master. Yeah, yeah, they have the high ground now. Yeah.
Like they had good teachers.
I don't know. I don't know. Do you know what? I will say this. I'm not, like, when it came to coaching wrestling, I've always, I was never a great wrestler myself. I was never a great high school prodigy or anything like that. I wrestled in high school, but I was never a great wrestler. And I would teach these kids, and I'd Google stuff and look stuff up, and we really always stuck to the basics.
Right.
And the kids just got really good at the basics. So they weren't getting anything fancy from me. And actually, as they were getting older, they would go on special camps and stuff, and they'd come back and they'd be like, "Oh man, coach, the coaches there all know so much." I'd say, "Why don't you teach today? You teach what you learned." So yeah, I think with me and coaching, it was more about like motivating the kids and keeping them engaged and teaching them a lot of that sportsmanship. And again, focusing on the basics. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah.
Whether it's in police use of force, or whether it's in wrestling, or if you do some other martial art, I'm a big fan of working on the basics and doing those very well.
Right.
And to me, it's not the quantity of things that it's the quality that the things.
A lot of things, if you master the basics, a lot of these other things will take care of themselves. Like you can get a really good solid ground, right?
Yeah. It takes one move to take somebody down. If you can learn that move so well that people can't counter it, you don't need a lot more. You might throw a couple other ones in your toolbox, but the reality, and it's the same thing with me in policing. Like I have a handful of things that I would draw on if I have to deal with somebody physical.
Right.
That are the same things that I use all the time. And that comes from, I played rugby for a while in Steinbach.
Okay.
Like rugby might come into it a little bit, and there's
Right.
only a handful of things that I would use if I had to deal with somebody physically.
Yeah. That, I think that you can see even as you're talking, like whether you're coaching, whether you're training, whether you're doing all these things, even police, how you operate the police department here is it's very community focused. It's very back to, I want to give back. I want to teach these kids how to do this. I want to teach them life lessons, skills. I want to teach officers these skills so that when they're in the field, they can be safe. Right? Like,
I never thought of it that way, but you're right. And it goes back to what we strive for here in St. Anne, is being good at like the basics, like the basics of policing, that interaction with people and how you deal with people. And as a policeman, like, you have an opportunity in a lot of scenarios to dictate how the scenario goes. And the way that you behave as a policeman is directly going to impact what happens at that call. And I always say we have an opportunity to spin people up or spin them down.
Yeah.
And depending on how you interact will determine whether or not that becomes a physical confrontation, what you do with that person. And it comes down to the basics of dealing with people. If you come into a situation and you take all the control away from somebody, you're not giving them a lot of opportunity but to push back, right? Because none of us like that. So knowing that when you go into it, and knowing as a basic strategy, I can't go in there like a bull and take all the control away from this man who's dealing with a situation. And I say man because that tends to be what we deal with, right? But if I go in there and I'm confrontational as a policeman and I'm trying to take all the power away.
Yeah, and you're never going to somebody on their best day.
No, that's the thing. Like, the thing in St. Anne is we're lucky because we deal with a lot of people outside of the realm of having to arrest people. So we deal with a lot of people on positives. there's all kinds of scenarios where we're giving people advice, or we're just trying to help out. But like a lot of times when you're getting a call and you're going to something, yeah, and it's funny you say that, because when I teach courses and I talk to people, it's exactly what I talk about is you got to understand that, like, we're crisis managers. When you're going to a call, you're potentially dealing with somebody, whether it's the victim or the offender or both, that are having the worst day of their life.
Yeah.
You can contribute to that, or you can help make it better.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to arrest people, and that's part of the process. But how you do that and how you interact with them is going to determine where that all goes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I talk about it early in my career. Early in my career, I was probably in more physical confrontations in the first 5 years of my career than I have been in the whole rest of my 35-year policing career.
It's maturity, right?
Maturity and understanding. Sometimes you got to understand, where's the problem here?
Yes.
Like, why am I getting into so many fights all the time? Why does everybody want to fight with me all the time?
I guess that'd be a big thing, right?
Right? Why is that I go to calls and people want to fight with me all the time? Because I'm giving off not only with my attitude, but like my energy.
The one common denominator would be you in every situation, right?
Exactly. You look at there's something wrong here, and he looks like a Frenchman from New Brunswick, right?
And you figure that out, right?
Yeah.
And that's just learning how to deal with people in general. I think as you go and just as people, learn that the way I deal with people now is a lot different than I did 5 years ago, which is different than 10 years.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just an element of understanding, if you actually care to understand, is what's really going on. Yeah. Understanding that people are in different places in their lives at all times and don't have a clue what they're going through. Right?
1,000%. And I think there's also a lot to knowing yourself and understanding your triggers.
Yeah.
And what are the things that are going to cause you. So when you're dealing with people, they all have triggers.
Yes.
And you as a policeman have triggers too. So it's understanding, like, I know what those triggers are, and I got to be careful if somebody starts like flipping those switches, because that has a potential for me to behave in a way that I don't want to either.
Right.
And that becomes cyclic. And I know what my triggers are, and I know, like, when people start pushing those buttons, I've got to be aware that there's a potential that I'm going to react to that. So maybe I got to pull myself out of that situation rather than saying something that I want to say.
Yeah. And that's where you got to be, the control aspect, you got to be in control of you, right? Like,
yeah.
Then once that's first and foremost, then you can go into situations and navigate through with that.
And sometimes they're not always rational. Like, those triggers aren't always rational triggers, but there's times that I catch myself halfway through an encounter with somebody, and I'll say, hey, can we just stop this? Can we reset? I teach a lot of courses on de-escalation.
Yeah.
And that's great to be able to teach that stuff and to know it and to understand it. And it's completely different to be in that scenario and be in a situation where you have to deal with it yourself and understand, like, we dig a lot of holes for ourselves when we're dealing with people.
Absolutely.
And if we can sometimes recognize that we've done that, then we're in an opportunity to stop and say, hey, can we reset here? I apologize for what I said or the way what I've done, but can we reset here, because this isn't going well?
And just knowing that, reading the situation well and taking responsibility for yourself, because
absolutely,
and even there, I'd imagine people would look at that and relate to be like, oh, he just did that. Why would he do that? Isn't he supposed to be the arrogant? Like, I don't know. I'm not trying to.
No, 100%.
That's the idea, right? Is like also that humbleness is like, wait a second, what's going on?
Or to say, you know what I just said there was wrong. Listen, I apologize. Do you know what? Let's try this again. And that can be so much as you go to a domestic and you show up there and a woman's got a black eye and the guy's there and he's being standoffish with you. And you've got automatically a preconceived notion of what's gone on, and you got a bit of a disdain for this guy, and he's talking to you and you don't even look at him as he's talking to you. You're half ignoring him.
Right.
And you don't even maybe realize that you're doing it, but you're showing by your expressions, by your emotions, by all of this, that you don't give a shit what this guy's saying. And now he's getting pissed because he's trying to tell you what happened, and your body language is showing it that you're not listening.
You don't care. Yeah.
You don't care.
You already made
your mind up.
Yeah.
You don't care. And nobody's perfect. I've been there countless times.
Yeah.
But now I'd be more in a situation where I would, if I get called on it, you don't even want to listen to what I'm effing saying.
Yeah.
You know what, sir? You're right. I'm sorry. Let's start over here. What's going on? I understand you're having a really bad day. What's going on, man? And that can change the whole thing. You get to all these, you're dealing with people, you get to all kinds of forks in the road. And it's really dependent which one you choose to take.
Yeah. That
will impact what's going to happen.
Even in real estate, when I go to a house, somebody I don't know,
yeah,
and you're talking to the couple, and usually there's one that's going to be more dominant and want to show you everything, one that's going to be a little bit shyer or whatever. And I often try to make sure I pay attention to both. And just even the shyer one is, what are your thoughts on this? I know him,
right,
or her,
right.
They vocalize it through right from the entrance,
absolutely,
right? But what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't care. No. What do you like this room? Did you like this? Right. I try to engage with them, and then even if there's kids, especially kids, are like, what do you guys think of this? And just
yeah.
Or if they want to sell their house, it's like, hey, why don't you take me to your room? Show me your room. Kids love doing that, right? And they're excited. So you get to figure out what people like, because if you're asking genuine questions and you actually want to know, you can get to the root of an issue. Like, I'm sure policing is not the same as real estate, but people
are people. People are the same.
Yeah.
And people like to be heard. And part of my problem is I talk too much. And when I get nervous, I talk even more. And I don't do often enough listening. And people really like it when you listen to them.
Right.
I use my wife as an example. My wife's shy. She's quite an introvert. But you wouldn't know it when you meet her. And my wife never wants to talk about herself. She's always going to ask you, tell me about yourself. Right. Tell me about this. People will say, oh my God, your wife's so outgoing. I love her so much. She's so engaging. She loves to listen. Sometimes I didn't even want to talk to that guy, but I didn't know what to say or whatever. But because she's listening and she's listening to what they're saying, that engages them.
That's why you started doing this, is because I like talking to people. I like listening, like asking questions. Let them talk. Let them have a place to share a story and tell their get theirs. Just because, well, I'm engaged by that. I think other people are too. So it's
for sure
a matter of giving people a platform to do it. Right?
Well, that happened with you and I. Like, we had known each other for a long time, but we really hadn't had any opportunity to talk. And then we went to a course in Brandon together, where we had an hour and a half drive each way back, and it was a great opportunity to talk. And I remember leaving the truck saying, wow, like, that was great. That was really nice, because we both had a lot to talk about. And again, we've known each other for a long time, but never really had an opportunity to talk or get to find out about what we think about things. And
that was really good. I think that's those opportunities, if you could take advantage of, where you can actually have a conversation with people, isn't it? Often even just listening, though, right? Coming back to that whole thing, right? So I did have another question, a little bit going back to the policing. Going forward, do you think the police is going to be, like, the future of policing? Is it going to be changing? Is it going to be?
It's going to have to.
I just think it's an interesting topic, and I put you on the spot a little bit if you're okay with that.
I sometimes have some fairly controversial views on policing. I think that the cost of policing is not sustainable anywhere. So I think that there's going to have to be a tiered model that looks at different ways of approaching things, because I don't think that we can keep going the way that we are. Policing costs are just all around too high. And that's no fault of anybody. It's just the reality of it. The reality is it costs X amount of dollars for a policeman, and that's a lot of money. I think that everybody needs to start coming up with other strategies, and I think those strategies involve a tiered model.
Okay.
And I think that tiered model means one group looking at this type of thing specifically, and other groups maybe being involved in small town policing. I really like what the province is brought out with the community safety officers program. I really like what they've done in other provinces. Saskatchewan's brought out their marshal service, which is a supplemental service to deal with some higher end things in support of the RCMP in other groups, but controlled by the province. I really like that. New Brunswick's done the same thing with enforcement there. I think the city of Winnipeg is on the right track.
Okay.
I think that with their community safety officers that were looking at bus safety, I was involved in training a lot of those people, and I see that as a way of being a middle ground. Winnipeg has a number of really good programs, but like the three that I would talk about would be the Downtown Community Safety Partnership, the Community Safety Officer Program, and Winnipeg City Police. And I think that when you look at the three of those groups combined, you have the Downtown Community Safety Partnership, which is involved in making things safe for the homeless people,
Right.
interacting with them, getting them resources. You have the Community Safety Officer Program, which is involved in some of that, but it also has an enforcement component, meaning people that are being aggressive, assertive, problematic, they can deal with on a specific level. Then you have Winnipeg City Police that can deal with more serious things. I think we have to continue to look at ways of tiering what we do, because not everybody is suited to deal with everything, and nor should everybody deal with everything. Like you look at a policeman, right? So a policeman's got to be a tough guy that goes to a call in the north end and has to fight with some guy with a knife. He's also got to be some guy who goes and does a school talk, and he's also got to be this empathetic guy that can interview somebody on a sexual assault. Where do you find that guy?
That's a lot to be.
Right? Where do you find that guy? So I think you have to start looking at where do you allocate resources that can best deal with a specific situation at that time. And they're not all at the pay scale of a policeman, and they don't all have the same authority, but different levels of group. I talk here about our community safety officer program. I see that program expanding here because I see it as a bridge between policing and some of the other things that we need addressed within the community that don't need policemen. I think in the city, like completely on the right track with the Downtown Community Safety Partnership and their interaction at one level, then moving to your CSO group and then to your city group. I personally think that's the direction policing needs to go.
Okay.
I think that there needs to be, I certainly think there needs to be more of a focus on rural crime in the rural area. That's beyond my pay grade to decide how that should look, but
Right.
there's certainly a resource deficiency in policing right now. People are not interested in getting into policing.
That's a big thing now, eh?
That's a huge thing. You look at the RCMP, they've got in the province a 26% vacancy rate, and that's not taking into account people that are on sick leave, stress
Right.
leave, all of those other things. There's a 26% vacancy rate, and they can't fill those positions. I know I post for positions and get no trained people interested in applying sometimes. We're different here because we go out and solicit people that we know and people that we want. But the reality is that across the board, places are providing huge bonuses for people to get into policing, and they're just not interested in it. And I think there's a number of reasons. I think that people are looking at other jobs that interest them. Maybe they see all the negative press that the police get, and I want to be careful. I don't want to say that the negative press that the police get isn't sometimes warranted, and I don't want to crap on mainstream media for being anti-police. You sure don't see a lot of feel-good police stories.
No.
Policing's changed from when I was a policeman. When I joined in the 90s, policemen were the good guys. I'm a policeman, and people were
Right.
wanted to talk to you about it, and they thought that was great. You were one of the good guys, and I still see myself as one of the good guys, but I don't know if that's the way that we're portrayed as much anymore. And I think that if you're a young person maybe looking at getting into policing, there's an awful lot of negative things about policing out there versus the positive stuff that happens every day, right? We see the tidbits in the media, right? Police in North America would have millions of interactions daily with people, right? With the public. That none of those are noteworthy, make the press, but the negative stuff sure makes a good story.
And it makes
I've seen
pulls
it.
up.
Listen, I've seen it in my career, and I've seen it in relation to me personally. I've seen it in relation to my police department personally, where you go, that's not the full story. But the full story is not nearly as engaging as the negative one about the police, right?
Right.
So
I wonder though, like, because we talked about this a number of times, is the pendulum kind of swung out on in society in a lot of ways. I think we're starting to see it swing back with it. I wonder if that's going to have an effect with that as well.
Policing, so experts in policing are saying that as well, that they're seeing that pendulum swing back. Like social media, that's the other one. Like I always say on social media, 5% of the people on social media love the police. They're quite vocal about it.
Yeah.
5% of them hate the police. They're quite vocal about it. And 90% are completely indifferent.
Just don't care.
Just don't care. It has nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
But we put a lot of weight into what these, on both sides, what these 5%
Absolutely.
5% say, right?
Yeah.
I think, and sometimes it's who yells the loudest, right?
And typically that negative often gets more of the
It's more,
attention, right? So.
it's more sensational, and I'll tell you what I hate about social media is that it doesn't give me an opportunity to fight back on a lot of things.
Right.
Because people can say what they want and you go, that's an outright lie. That's not true. And if the public knew the whole story, they wouldn't be supporting this person.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be supporting. If the public were able, if I were able to say, hey, listen, anybody out there, you want to come take a look at this file? Come take a look at it and see what this person did. See what their actual actions are. Right? It changes everything, but you can't do that, and you can't fight all those battles all the time. But yeah, like for me, I go on Facebook and I read stuff sometimes, and I'll type a response and then I'll delete it because I'm like, I can't post that because I'm supposed to be above this. Somebody's on there talking about an interaction that they had with the police, and you're like, that's not true.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah.
That's not what the interaction was at all.
Oh yeah.
Like this person's not being honest at all. And you just go, And that's the stuff you go home. I've actually tried to stop reading it. There was some stuff not too long ago, and some people emailed me about it and said, oh, you should respond to this. And I was like, you know what, I'm not even gonna read it because I know how ludicrous it is. I know how and then what would make me even angrier is when I go on and I read the other comments by people supporting it. You go, sometimes you want to go, you people are all crazy.
How clueless, yeah.
You're really going to believe this guy and what he's saying in this scenario?
Yeah. Well,
I get it.
The other side of it is, okay, and this happened to me where somebody went and said stuff about me because on council, they disagreed with something and they said something, I'm like, well, 5-10% of that is true.
Yeah.
There's an element of truth to that,
Yeah.
but like that, the rest of it, I'm like, you just missed, you totally, right? And people, and I got that sent to me, like 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, I'm not going to worry about it, whatever. Next morning, I woke up and my phone I had just messages. I was like, so I went back and looked at this thing because I just glanced at it. I'm not going to waste my time. Yeah. And I was like, great. So I made one message, responded, and I just copy and pasted to everybody who messaged me. Yeah. And they're like, and a bunch of them were like, okay, you should really say that on there. I'm like, if I say that, now it's me versus them. Right. And now you're going to tear me apart. Now it's going to be there for the next week. Absolutely. Over something dumb. Yeah. I let it die. And you know what? Later that next day, they were mad about somebody parked the wrong way. It was just like, and it was the same person. He was like, look how ludicrous, like, how dumb this is, right?
Somebody told me, like, you can respond to something and keep it going, or you can leave it and people will forget about it in a week. Yeah. But if you keep if you keep it in the media, or if you keep it on social media, it's going to keep it going. But if you just ignore it, it will go away. The problem is sometimes, from an ego perspective, it's hard sometimes.
I had to learn that one.
From an ego perspective, it's hard. You read something and you go, "That is absolutely not true." Yeah. And then and ideally, like I tell people, if you have a legitimate complaint, come see me.
Absolutely.
Like, we'll investigate. I'm not gonna condone any wrongdoing. Right. We'll investigate it. And if you're not happy with my decision, go to the law enforcement review agency. They'll do it. We've had people do that, and stuff gets shut down usually pretty quick, where it comes back and says, yeah, that's completely unfounded. Yeah. As a matter of fact.
That's why you document everything and you cover yourself, right?
Yeah. So. It's so hard when you're always worried that, what you're going to say is going to come back, or people are going to, people are recording you, or which is all the things that happen to me, right? Like
Yeah.
people record my conversations with them and they film it and they, all that stuff, which is okay. That's,
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything that, or I'm going to try not to say anything that's going to get me in trouble. But yeah, I don't know how we got down this rabbit hole, but it's certainly a rabbit hole,
Yeah,
right? And I don't, I want to be careful. I don't want to sound whiny about it. I think I fully support that if people think that the police have done them wrong in any way, that they should complain about it. And that's whether they think a policeman was too rude with them, whether a policeman was too standoffish, or if it's as far as a policeman was too excessive in force.
Right.
I wholeheartedly agree with people complaining about that and support it 1,000%. I don't want people doing that stuff out there. I don't want policemen doing that stuff out there. The problem is that people don't make those complaints and they put their stuff out into social media without any avenue for the veracity of those statements to be addressed.
Yeah.
And that's where I have problems. Things have changed since COVID, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
People are more aggressive. Everybody's a little bit meaner.
It seems so, eh?
Oh, absolutely. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
Since COVID, people have less of a filter. They're meaner. They're less trusting of authority. Yeah, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Makes it more challenging for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. You got anything else you want to share about here? Like,
No, I don't think so. I think I talked my face off, and I probably said some things that'll get me in trouble here too.
Time flew by. So it was,
yeah, it's awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah,
And,
my pleasure.
yeah. Stay tuned for the next one.